You are live. Please unmute. Please unmute. Please unmute.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Kramer is absent. Commissioner O'Rourke.
Here.
Commissioner Rexroth.
Present.
Chairman Wessel.
Here.
Commissioner Ross.
Here.
Commissioner Alguier.
Here.
Commissioner Lautner. Present.
At this time, we have our first opportunity for public comment. At last week's board meeting, we did change the public comment rules for the executive committee. But at regular meetings and special meetings, if you want to make a public comment on any topic, that is fine. We would ask you to limit your public comment to 3 minutes, and we'll recognize you if you raise your hand. Yes, please come forward.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys. I don't remember the protocol, but I remember your awesome face. Thank you, because you relax me.
Please identify yourself.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Carrie Onan, and we live in Centerville Township. My husband, Tim, and I are tax-paying property owners in Leelanau County. And as taxpayers, we are deeply concerned about the overall spending our county government has done over the last few years. And it's time for you, our current elected officials, to rein in that spending, please. We know we're not the only ones. You guys hold the purse strings. We all know that. And it's time to rein that spending in. And this was going on prior to last year when the Democrats officially gained the board majority. So both Democrats and Republicans, in our opinion, are complicit in this. We, your constituents, are the ones who ultimately foot the bill. no matter how complex and convoluted possibly by design, that money trail becomes, that burden to pay every project you guys bring forth ultimately rests on our shoulders. And it's time for that to stop. It's time for it to end. Please rein in that spending. So that's my first point. My other point is this decision on the issue of leasing space in our county government center. If I'm understanding it correctly, this is to be leased to the Benzie Leelanau Health Department. So this issue appeared to be placed on hold at the last commissioners meeting, but now it really looks as if there's an effort to push the contract through for some reason without doing your due diligence, definitely without us being able to do our due diligence and weigh in on this. So we, as your tax-paying constituents, we want that opportunity, and I don't believe we've had a full chance to do that. So our question for you today is, what's the rush? What's the big hurry? If for some reason this idea does get pushed through, at the very least, this contract needs to be written with full cost allocations for the space, just like we do for every other office in our courthouse. So again, the bottom line is, what's the rush? What's the big hurry? This issue needs to be moved to September to make sure that it's done with the best interests of our county in mind. We love the people of Benzie, of course. They're our neighbors. We care a great deal about them. It's not just about any special interests, and it's certainly not about state or federal government overreach into our county. And so we're asking you to give yourselves and all of us a few more weeks to do our due diligence, push it to September, before a commitment is made that we will have to pay for years to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Yes.
Hi, I'm Renee Weiler. I'm from Lake Leelanau. And we have a lot of questions about this project. And so at our meeting today, I just kind of scribbled some down. These are things that we should probably put in a FOIA request maybe. But we need answers to these. I think they're all legitimate questions. One of our members said something about taxpayers gifting between agencies or to an agency. Is that a legal concern? He seemed to think it was. That's something that I guess you're, the taxpayer gifting money or the agencies gifting to another. Is that a legal concern? I don't know. Where will all the equipment that's there, where will it go? Will that be an additional expenditure? They said something about building a pole barn. Let's see, the senior service equipment, where will that go? That has to have a place. And then we have Benzie children and Benzie seniors entering into the equation. I'm also concerned about construction bids. Were there any construction bids? Was there one? Was there two? Do we know? Do we have an agreement with someone? We have three. Thank you for that. And why did the center, the health center, sell their perfectly good building? And what were their plans? Was this planned a long time ago to move into here? And how does that subject the whole community center here to COVID? Because there's going to be the health department. I know I went and got my COVID test there. Are they going to have COVID tests there? Is there something in the agreement that allows them to do that? Are they going to have vaccinations there? I got COVID from a vaccinated person who thought it was okay to come to work because he had had a booster. So the whole COVID thing, bringing in that element to a building that has judges, clerks, our register of deeds, our treasurer, everything, that's kind of a concern for me. And does that subject us to any kind of liability? Has that been thought through? I would really like to have answers to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will be answering some of those as our administrator presents produce the recommendation for the lease agreement. Any other public comment? Yes.
Hi, my name is David Mosher, and I've been a resident of the county for 13 years. And I have a question regarding, well, I guess kind of just an observation that this beautiful center was built because the previous resources in the building couldn't function. It needed more space. So the growth of government, the growth of the county, and it is growing. Has there been a study or anticipation about, as you need more space available, what you may later regret you sacrificed in the basement, giving it to the health department for later on when you needed those reasons? It's hard to predict, but to a point you can look at the future and say, boy, I wish we had had that extra space. And it was just my thought. I was wondering if that had been addressed and forecasted for what you might require down the road. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes.
My name is Jim Coverstead, Leelanau Township. I'm under the understanding that the Benzie Leelanau Health Department has two building office locations. One's in Benzie and one's in Leelanau at present that they're operating out of. Excuse me. Leelanau Health Department, I believe, like other departments, come under the umbrella of the county government in terms of their operating expenses and their operations. At present, there are two buildings that are being used, one in each county. The idea of, I guess, moving or consolidating whatever the attempt is or whatever the agenda is into one location when there's already two, and spending money at the present time for that would be at the expense of the county government. And I say that meaning the county health departments pay for whatever rent or wherever they're using at present. So there's an expense there occurring already. If they're looking into moving into a new location, say in the basement here, and there has to be money put out for remodeling along with whatever the square footage of the rental space you want to charge, which is, I'm heard, once again, these are questions, is more than what they were initially looking at spending, that would increase their operating cost. A smaller governmental unit underneath the umbrella of the county, operations costs would go up with that rental increase. Granted, the revenue produced would go into the main government as a source of revenue from renting out that space, but the operating expenses of that department are going to go up because the operating expenses just increased with a new rental square footage agreement with wherever they go. So who's funding the health department? My belief is it falls under the umbrella of the county government. So even though we may be drawing in rent as the umbrella, we're still having to fund individual departments maybe a little bit more for their operational costs for something they're already in right now at whatever their expenses are, just in trying to consolidate or bringing them into the county seat proper building itself. It would incur an additional expense for operation for the health board, which we in turn would have to pay for at the county level. And where do we get our money? We all know that. So I don't know if there's really a need to do that right now without further investigation into exactly what we need, where we need it. Plus, I've been informed too, the space here, things would have to be shuffled around. I don't know whose department's storing what, where, how, when, how long. But it all adds to the expense of, you got to borrow from Peter to pay Paul, well, you're still short.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deborah.
Any other public comment? Yes.
Laura Tarsa, Solon Township. So I'm just jumping in because I just heard about this meeting. So some of my questions might be redundant, but if are we in the middle of deciding on budget, or did we just decide on a budget? I know you can't answer the question, but if we've already decided on a budget and now this is coming up and we have to remodel, again, I'm just hearing little bits and pieces, and we have to remodel to accommodate the health department offices here, that would mean a change to the budget that was just decided on, if that's the case. And how does that get accommodated to the taxpayers? Is the health department reimbursing for that remodel? Things like that. Those were just simple questions I had as I was driving up to try to see what's going on. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope diligent attention to this before a decision is made. Thank you.
Laura. Any other public comment? Thank you. Any commissioner comment? Commissioner Algar.
I'm always glad to see interested citizens in our meetings. So good to see all of you. Most of the questions, I'd like to say that most of the questions you raised will probably be answered during our session today. A couple of things, a lot of you want more information. This has been discussed for 2 years. So there are lots and lots of minutes you can refer to next week when you're bored. Both health department minutes and commission meeting minutes. And we have plenty of storage, you guys. I also want to say, we have this gorgeous room downstairs. Beautiful windows, big spacious space. You know what's in there? Shredders, bikes, trash cans with some stuff in them, a few exercise machines. I will be delighted to see this fabulous space developed and used productively. I just need to say that because it's a beautiful room.
Yes, Commissioner Rush.
Yeah, I'd just like to share that I worked for about 6.5 years down in the basement when the Soil Conservation District was also allowed to take unused space in the basement. And we turned it into a very vital part of this county building, offering our services, most of them free to every single resident of the county, to help manage their natural resources in a more sustainable way. The county allowing us to come over here and have a similar agreement has just really benefited both both organizations, the county, more traditional, what you think of it as a county services, and the conservation district. But most importantly, it is best served the residents of our county and the great county that we all cherish. So opening our doors to collaborate with others who have only the best interests of our residents in their minds and in every single job that they do is, I see, a win-win. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rush.
That's actually a question for process here. Is it normal in a special meeting like this not have approval of the agenda? We don't do that.
Posted the agenda in advance, and we were limited to what we posted. We could not add to it.
Just as it's not add or subtract, it's order. If I look at the purpose of the meeting, you would be, I think, irresponsible to proceed with acceptance of a bid without acceptance of a lease agreement. I think they're out of order. For responsibility, I think it would be, no matter how it's taxed out, it's not nice for us to enter into an agreement to construction, so we don't have a lease agreement in place.
With consensus, we could shift that agenda if I would.
I just want to switch it around.
Yeah, the first item should be the lease agreement itself before we accept it. Because once you accept the bid proposal and then we have disagreement on the lease, we entered into a contract with a lessee. And that's not good business, so.
That makes sense to me. Any objection to doing that? We will do that, Jen. We will shift B to A and A to B. Commissioner Locke.
I just want to say, I think that there was a lot of good points brought up, and I do want to counter a couple of other things that were said by commissioners. Number one, this really hasn't been discussed in any depth at all for 2 years. It has only been this last month that we really started digging into this. So we can't just keep saying, oh, we've kicked this around for 2 years. No, we have not. Commissioner suggested this a couple of years ago. It could be very correct that the health department has pursued this further, but we have not. You know, as far as the soil conservation district, yes, I would say the soil conservation district did get here first. And they did take the available space we were looking to build out in the future, and that is that corner, which leaves us this last buildable space. And I think the point made that we don't know where government is going is very good. So to spend any money right now, to figure an office down there to fit something we have no idea we're going to need in the future is just really bad. It's really bad practice just because it's a pretty room, so we should finish it. It is serving a purpose, and everything in that room would have to be moved out, including the shredders. Where are we going to shred paper? So it does have a purpose right now, and sometimes it's okay. It's okay to do nothing. My main concern right now is the potential action, and I just hope that by also consensus, we can have discussion on this today and maybe get some of these questions answered. But we are absolutely in no position to take action on this today. We've got, if we do even get somewhere down the lease agreement, it's going to have to go back to our attorney. And then as I walk in today, I had not seen this prior. It looks like we just got this from our attorney today on the 29th. I haven't had a chance to get all the way through this. So honestly, a special meeting to discuss this, I think, is fine, but we absolutely can't take action and do any due diligence, as was mentioned today. This is premature. So if we can just by consensus understand we're going to discuss this and maybe get more of our questions answered, I'm okay with that. Even terms. We haven't discussed terms as a board. We haven't come to a consensus on terms. Nobody in the county, to my knowledge, has put pen to paper. I didn't. And this is the agreement in place is a bad one for the county, in my opinion. So that would be my comments, is take the action off today. As far as, in by consensus, we can say, all right, if somebody says, well, can we ask accounting to put pen to paper, that might be an action item. We can do that by consensus because it's a special meeting. So same as the cost allocation. We need to know what those cost allocations are going to be by the square footage. We can get that. We don't have it yet. There's a lot of things we don't have.
Anyways, our letter from our council today, there's a couple things I highlighted. One is I have not yet responded to her comments on proposed lease. Her comments is being Lisa over the attorney, right, for the health department, and there's 15 questions there. I have an attorney and I've got a contract coming up. I think I want him or her to go over all the 15 questions, concerns pointed out, and there's a bunch of them here about putting the health department at risk and things, and there's concerns on both sides here. I really think we should have more input from our attorney on the 15 items.
I'm just gonna echo those concerns. I mean, we just saw, I didn't see this before I sat down. 15 items of concern from their attorney, and we, no matter where you see it on the rest of the, we cannot proceed without a lease in place. And we have new language that he's incorporated, we haven't seen yet, and a fair amount of these 15 items that I don't know what the result is. And I think it would be irresponsible to move forward. We can discuss on these items, but having just seen this, I would not support moving forward without some more time to understand its impacts. And I agree with Commissioner and Commissioner O'Rourke in that matter.
And my comment would be that we've been, since Mr. Bonner brought this forward, we've been talking about this for 2 years. I do understand the concern about unanswered questions. We're not bound to take action today. And I think the suggestions to making sure that we know the answers to our questions make sense. And I would certainly support, just as one member of this commission, having our discussion today, get our questions answered today, and bring this back to the September meeting for final vote and action. That makes sense to me. And unless there's objection, we do not need to take action today, and I suspect there's not consensus on what action we want to take, nor would we reach a decision today. I would certainly support having discussion and urge us not to take action, but I can't prevent somebody from making a motion.
As well as we could make a motion to table it indefinitely.
We could.
How can we do this?
Could we move from commissioner comments then to the regular business? I guess the administrator to speak to the issue and the lease agreement and what's happened since the last meeting. And then Mr. Johnson is here and he can reflect what happened at the health board meeting last week. And then we can go to A, B, C and have our discussion. Deb Allen, please.
So starting with what now would be item A, the lease agreement. What you have before you that was just handed out was new information that we received this morning from the county's attorney. And so this is based on communication between the health department's attorney and the county's legal counsel on an assessment of the current lease agreement. It does reflect a change in the term of the lease, which was in question before, taking it from 15 years to the recommendation for 10 years.
Who's
The health department's recommendation to
not this
reduce it.
board's.
Correct, to reduce it to 10 years, acknowledging, I believe, not speaking on behalf of the health department, I'll let Eric do that, but certainly acknowledging that the cost of the project, the revised project, was less than what was initially intended. And so there was an acknowledgement on their part that this was a fair and equitable reduction in the terms of the agreement. Since that conversation had happened last week at their board meeting, the subsequent discussion in regards to the actual review between the attorneys of the agreement have happened. And so that's why you're just getting this morning. Apologize, but we were also surprised by getting this kind of late. So that is information for the board to consider. The construction agreement, or I suppose item B now is the acceptance of the lower level build out bid. There were 3 bids that were submitted on behalf of the project, as was requested and also in essence required by the health department to have at least 3 bids so that there would again be a sense of equity and accountability moving the project forward. And so the 3 bids were reviewed, and the bid that is been presented was the lowest bid by a local company. And so that's been brought forward now for, again, consideration, acknowledging that the bids were opened the end of last month. And so we want to acknowledge the fact that without rushing a decision, we just want to acknowledge that in the current construction environment, we want to make sure that we're being, again, fair to the construction company to allow them time to plan, because they have the narrowest construction window also. So as we move our timeline, it may impact them as well. So we just need to be mindful of that. And then lastly, the construction agreement with that company, with RCI. So those were the three documents that we're going to be looking at today. That's, I believe, an overview of where we are, and I'd like to have Eric.
Yes, Mr. Johnson, the Director of Environmental Health for the Health Department. You could give us an overview of the discussions the health board's had and the needs of your department, please.
Sure. So just a little brief history without getting too crazy on this. 2 years ago, Commissioner Bunnick was on our Board of Health. And he understood that we had space issues up here in Leelanau because the building that we owned for quite some time was purchased by a school. The school has, good for them, has expanded and needed space and had moved into what was our office areas before and consolidated us down into a smaller area of building. He understood that. He mentioned, and he came to the health department and said, we have space in the lower level. We would like to see if that will work out for your environmental health division of the health department, not the personal health, which is different. Environmental health is septic and well permits, pools, campgrounds, and other areas that we would work with planning, soil erosion, building, all of those departments. So it seemed to make sense at the time. Personal health, which is vaccinations and women, infant and child care, and all of those programs will stay over in the building where they are now. And it was also a more cost-effective way for us to continue our operations without having to build another building, as you can imagine, would cost significantly more than what it would be for us to do a renovation in this building and to keep our offices in the other building. Not to say we can't do that sometime in the future, but financially, it's just not going to happen right now and would not be the sensible thing to do for taxpayer dollars at this point. So on that note, we looked at this many years ago. We had a proposal from the engineer, not a proposal, but an estimate from the engineer and architect who thought it was going to be around $500,000 to do what we thought initially. That's why we came up with the 15-year term that you discussed last meeting, because it made sense, financial commitment plus operating costs that everybody else in this building pays as well. The first bid that came in was excessively higher than $500,000. So we revamped the space downstairs, took out a lot of walls, and now it is a meeting room, 2 offices, and cubicles. So space that anybody in any division that you would ever want to move could use in the future. It is very generic. There's nothing crazy or strange about the layout at all. And in doing so, when we went back out and got the 3 bids that our board wanted, it came in significantly less than $500,000, around 378, if I remember correctly, somewhere in there, which led us to your discussion here at this board last time, saying that 15 years did not make sense anymore, and that you'd like us to take a look at that. Understanding that, finding that reasonable, and as I mentioned last time, we want to be good partners. If we're going to be moving into this building, we are a county organization. We do get allocation or appropriations from this board and Benzie as part of our operating costs. Environmental health also has fees that we use for our operating costs. So all of those, we want to be a good partner and be sensible with what we do. So looking at that, I went back to the Board of Health last week. Our meeting was on Wednesday, discussed your concerns, and we discussed it. And they came up with a 10-year term to understand your concerns and to meet you halfway on that aspect of things, because it made financial sense for us and was sustainable for our department to do it that way. So that's why I believe I'm here today, is to let you know that that's what happened, that the Board of Health has agreed to 10 years, if that is acceptable to this board and this body. So that's where we're at. And of course, as part of that, as we discussed last time, the health department will cover half the costs of the construction to remodel that area down below in the basement.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Now, we have three different pieces to this proposal, but it's hard to differentiate them. And I think it would be appropriate to have general discussion about the concept, and then we can take each one. But let's invite Commissioner's comment about what Eric has said, about what Deb has said, and any questions or comments or issues about any one of these agenda items.
Ty, if I may real quick, on the lease agreement, the reason I have to believe it's coming in late is because when we had concerns that this board wasn't sure if you wanted to move forward, we told our attorney, 'cause you know how attorneys charge, to hold off and wait. When we got Board of Health approval for lowering the terms, that's when we gave her the green light to go ahead and take a look at the lease agreement and to work with your attorneys to come up with something, whatever their agreement
I'm
are.
sorry.
And I'm not an attorney, so I can't speak to all that.
Repeat why you had her do that now?
Because we put her, initially, when we had the first bid come in and the first lease agreement came in from the county, we had her taking a look at it. There was some concern from this board that you weren't sure if you wanted to go forward with the term, you weren't sure if you wanted to go forward with the whole project. So we told her to hold off, wait until we get the county to tell us kind of what you're looking for and to go forward with that. When I got Board of Health approval last week to have us look at 10 years instead of 15.
That's where I think we have a misunderstanding. This board never said 10 years.
No, that is correct. Board of Health said 10 years, that we would bring that back to this board because you had concerns last meeting that 15 was too long.
As a health board member, I communicated to that health board meeting that this board was concerned, I thought, about a 15-year contract.
We talked about a number of years. We just did not settle on one.
We did not
This
settle.
came in at half the years is where we would logically begin. Just 7.5. It's not really much. Well, it's half of what the first
Okay,
one.
Commissioner, are you can have the floor.
Okay. Yes, it's half of what nearly half of what the original bid came in at. So, and even still, what was that? Have you done the math? What does that math come out to? And even at 10 years, I guess I'm surprised that the health department thinks $1,200 a month is fair rent for that space. How is $1,200 a month fair to this county for this building?
Thank you. Commissioner Alger.
I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is this is also important for customer service. I had a gentleman come out the door of the building last week looking like, where am I? He said, is this where I get a wells permit? I said, no, you have to go a mile down the road. People come here for construction permits. They come here for soil erosion permits. And it's a customer service that they can also go to environmental health. Those services, those areas are all related to each other for people doing construction, doing this kind of work. So this is really, we need to remember, this is a county function. We have space in our county building. We're really serving our people. When we make a very important service more convenient for them, they are being run out of the space down the road. That would mean that the Leelanau people would have to drive to Benzie to get a well permit. Or maybe go down 72 to Relicville or somewhere. That's not serving our population here. So this entirely makes sense. I don't agree that we have to do half. I think 10 years is very reasonable. We're not in this business to make money. We're in this to serve our people. This is a service.
Thank you, Commissioner.
One thing I brought up, whether or not this moves forward or not is one question, but if it does, and with the board support cost share for a owner's representative, we haven't had the best record with assuring that we get what we have paid for in these projects in the past. And I would not support moving forward without some sort of qualified individual under contract to represent both the health board and the county's interests during the construction part of this project. Because I don't know who else is going to do that. No, I don't think we're talking. Again, I'm not saying at this point, I'm saying that I support moving forward the project, but I can tell you I would not support moving forward without having somebody in place that makes sure that we got what we paid for.
A project manager.
A owner's representative, there's several terms that could be applied to it, but yeah.
Commissioner Ross.
We've done this before. Again, I'm gonna go back to this conservation district. We've done this before, and I have never heard one iota of a complaint, other than we do tend to track in a little more dirt on our shoes than anybody else, but we clean up after ourselves. I just don't understand why this is being looked at so differently. This building is our building, and this is our services we're providing our residents. I just think we can work out these details to make this lease agreement work for everybody, whether we have someone overseeing it. Who did it before, when we did it with the conservation district? Who oversaw that construction and all that work? I mean, I guess I just feel like we're reinventing something that we've already done before. Why is this hard? I don't think we answer that, but
I would just remind the commissioner that we have spent substantial amount of money fixing problems in this building that we didn't have anyone overseeing.
But it wasn't with the conservation district, I don't think.
But-
So I'm just saying that
No, it's just a general.
we're talking specifically about an unused space in the basement, very similar to what we already have done. And why is this making so many questions? I guess I just don't understand.
Thank you. Yes.
Again, we received a letter from our attorney today, reference him not answering 15 questions from your attorney, okay? And we have a thing here of lease agreement. There's no way anyone could go forward until our attorney answers these 15 questions. There's just no way. You're not doing your job, and they're good questions, both front and on both sides. But I don't want to go into 15 different items. We need to talk to our attorney this morning, who is Tim Perone, who single paragraph, I have not yet responded to her comments on the proposed lease. Thank you.
My thoughts, I like the idea of cost share for project. We get help in improving our facilities. I think the lease agreement, proposed lease agreement, there's 10 years is a whole lot better than 15, and I like that. We believe we need to make sure we know all the details that have been raised before we approve or sign on. And I think we have a couple of weeks to do that before our meeting. I like the idea of a project manager. I just should never not have a project manager in our future projects. Because we don't have the expertise to do that internally, and I think you have already said that. I also sure don't want to sit at this table and figure out how we're going to build a brand new $5-10 million health department building. And if we don't help solve that problem, and that's what Commissioner Bunny reminded us over and over again, it's partly our problem, and we have to be part of the solution. And So I think if we get to where we need to be, this could solve a need in our community, but I don't think we have to rush it. Yes, Commissioner Lutton.
Oh gosh, where to begin? You can't, it's not apples to apples to look at what we did with soil conservation and this. We were already paying the rent on soil conservation district and that building was sold. So we had to find housing for soil conservation. We did have that buildable space out available in the basement. So we moved everything out of that buildable space and put it in the last buildable space we have. So therein lies a lot of the bigger questions that would have to be answered that we should grapple with before we even consider that is where is all that stuff going to go? And that's the question of the pole barn. I know the courts are not thrilled with having all their equipment moved out of the building, out from where it is. And where are we going to place them? Where are we going to place a pole barn to put it? Exactly. We haven't even talked about that, and yet it's got to go somewhere. They need storage. So that's one thing that would have to be, that we ought to be figuring out. Where are we going to put shredding, etc. So the health department, while we do have to fund our health department, we don't have to house our health department. So the health department does have an issue. They sold the building. They obviously didn't keep a long enough lease on the amount of space they were going to need. That is an issue. What best to do for the health department then? The health department can go out right now and get a mortgage on a building. And there's federal funds available for remodel and of an existing building, not for building a new one, I understand, but for remodel of an existing building. But if the health department would spend their time looking at where they want to be in 10 years, instead of spending their money right now on this project and being without a home in 10 years, it would be much better for the health department ultimately to be together and be able to provide those customer services together out of one building somewhere within the county. So much of this we haven't even talked about. I don't know whoever came up with 15 years. We never discussed 15 years. That was cheap enough rent. I would say, well, you know, now we're gonna say 10. We haven't decided even that. Do we want to tie up that space for 10 years even if we move forward? What happens at the end of 10? Does it go then to $5,000 a month rent or market value instead of $1,200 a month rent? You know, I think the health department needs to figure out some of those things before we go jumping into this. That's not a long-term solution for the health department. As far as working together, I've done enough projects with the health department to know that I never had to come to the health department. Generally, environmental health services come to you. You can't do soil borings out of here. You can't inspect the septic tank from, or septic drain field area where it's going to go, all those soil barriers. You can't do that from out of this building. The health department has to go for those sort of things to the customer. And so in sending a check, doing it online, we've done that with our building inspections department. We're doing as much of that online now as we can, and as should the health department. Steve Christensen does most of his work in the field, and he goes and does his soil erosion permits. Those are done in the field. So as far as where the health department is housed, somewhere in this county is fine, but it doesn't need to be in the basement of this building and not set the health department up for some future. Again, this contract really hasn't addressed some of the concerns we had that we discussed in August, which is why I agree it certainly needs to be kicked out to at least September Again, it still says, public health. That's defined it here, public health services, and instead of environmental health services. That's just one of the, it's just one of the things. 10 years, we haven't decided on 10. It doesn't spell out cost allocations. It just talks about a couple of things that cost allocation would cover, but it doesn't talk about the cost allocation. It doesn't mention square foot, and what those costs would be. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Elgado.
You know, I'm just wondering what we're accomplishing here, except we're all being able to expand on our vision. If we need to review this contract, I propose that we do that. We need to be doing something concrete. We all have pretty strong opinions. There's a lot. I don't want to sit here and debate everything that our commissioners are saying. That's kind of fruitless for all of us. We all have our opinions. I see it as bottom line, a public service, so obviously I see it very differently. So should we have our attorneys need to deal with this? Are there specific elements here that we need to ask to be addressed?
I think that's what we're doing right now. I think we've raised, Commissioner Lautner has raised some questions about cost allocation. Commissioner Rexroad has raised a question about construction management. I think our administrator's taking notes.
So you're taking notes of the questions.
So but for review, where will equipment go in terms of maintenance, senior services for the owner's representative? I understand that has been offered by the engineer firm, so I'll confirm that in terms of as part of their project cost. What are the options for, again, where the equipment will be moved and the cost? Comments about shredding, we'll look into that, and storage and some of the things, the exercise equipment, what could possibly be moved into a separate room. And then how to address arrangements with the community health department after the terms, which will be something they'll need to think about in terms of what their long-term plan is. And then also the environmental health cost allocation and actual costs.
Okay, and so I have never understood that after 10 years, they would be gone. If they end up building a building, which is way too expensive to even imagine, and I can't, and we have to remember, it makes total sense to have environmental health right here for our citizens. But if by some wonderful gift, you were able to build a building way down the line, we have finished space. But I sure would not anticipate in a final approval on this, that in 10 years they're gone. We're looking at how to serve the residents here. And it makes total sense to have environmental health with, and plus, the more they have to spend on where they are, the fewer services they can offer to us. If they were going to maintain service, we have to give them more money if we're also expecting them to pay more. And so we have to remember that kind of thing. So this makes total sense. We do need answers to some questions, and I'd like to see this proceed to the second.
I'd like to share that I think is our role as commissioners is to find out information before we make decisions. So I did take time last week and I spoke with Buzz Long in the Conservation District, Steve Christensen in the Conservation District, and Amber Weber, our Construction Codes Director. And I'd like to just read her response to my question about how she felt about this move. And this is what she told me. Our understanding in adding the environmental provision of the health department to the lower level is to essentially create a one-stop shop for contractors and property owners in Leelanau County. my staff, and I see the advantage and support having the environmental division in the same building as building safety and the soil conservation district. But we are aware that the final use of the space will be decided by the county board of commissioners. That's really vital information for us all to remember. Again, this is our service. How can we best serve the residents of the county and support our staff that work for us? I think it's pretty clear.
Thank you. I just have a quick question for help from myself. The lease agreement, and addressing Commissioner Algar's questions, clearly says 10 years and that's it. There is no extension language that is automatic or has to one opt out. I mean, the document here is a 10-year lease, and whatever, if it changes 7 or 8, whatever it is the health department looking ahead prepared, okay, this, I mean, there is kind of a kick it down the road part of this when I look at it. There's no guarantee. I mean, if this commission has people sitting here and we have space concerns of our own, and we're faced where we're sitting here 10 years from now, and I don't know who that'll be. I can only assure you who it won't be.
I won't.
Yeah, that's speaking for you. I just take what you want out of it, yeah, but to me, if you're sitting here and we have to make a decision, do we build another building? Because the space we need is yours. I'm pretty sure that they would say, you gotta leave. Because we need the space, at least. That would be the common sense thing to do. So I'm just wondering, has this been discussed on your end that you're prepared that this is 10 years and 10 years only? I mean, there's no guarantee of anything else in that in this document. And we can't make a promise no matter who we are. That binds a future board of commissioners.
I think you kick us out.
I don't think so.
So I mean, that's, I guess, I don't know if that's been discussed. So that's a long question, but it's.
Sure. Well, I understand where you're coming from, and obviously that's your right as the, organizational head here to kick us out and down the road if that's what happens. And obviously we are always planning for that, but right now we don't have any agreement in place where we would have to necessarily have something formal in our documents, because we don't even know if this is going to go forward. So obviously, if it does go forward, that gives us the time to figure out what we're going to do if you ever do kick us out. Because we have not only space issues, but it is also location issues in this county. So we could build something down in Graylickville, which doesn't service anybody in, Northport or Leland. That's why this is such a great location, right? So that's why we look here. If it's after we get in, or if we ever get in, we have got to look for space, then we make a plan for that. It's kind of, we're in limbo right now because we don't know what's going to happen right now, right here. So, but yes, we would definitely make plans.
Before we go to Commissioner Lautner, Commissioner Rourke.
Just one question for our note taker over here. Melinda brought up the point of public health services as opposed to environmental health services. Vaccinations and sometimes the things that we get into. Years before I became an officer, I was a Spanish translator for food stamps in Benton County. Okay, I had 100 people standing in line. I couldn't ask for any identification. I just issued the food stamps and how many kids had it. Being a policeman, I'm a little bit paranoid, and I like to run file checks on people, and I want to know who's in my building. And that's just me and what I spent my whole life doing. And the last thing I want to see is the public health department come in unless it has a separate entrance guarded from the rest of the house.
Before we go to Commissioner Lautner, I'd like to ask a question, because Commissioner Lautner talked about you giving up your lease. I don't believe you voluntarily gave up your lease. You lost space because the school expanded, needed more space.
Well, it's a long story. We own the building. We built it initially with a school there. Then 2, 3 years into us owning that building, that school left. And we had this albatross around our neck for about 8 years. It was seriously affecting our finances and our stability in that aspect of things. And when we finally had Leelanau School come and say they wanted that space, but they wanted control of that space, we said, please purchase it. So it took that albatross off of our neck. We became renters in that aspect of things. We have 3-year lease agreements with them. They determined after the first 3 years, they needed more space because they're growing. Good for them. And that is our concern at the moment. But that's why we are now renters and not the owners of this said building. So
The other comment I made, I personally, as one commissioner, not interested in using one of the nicest spaces in the building for storage. I mean, I think that's an issue that we need to address. Commissioner Lautner?
The nicest spaces in this building are courtrooms, so not the basement level. So therein you drive home my point, Commissioner Wessel, is that health department did not look out for health department. They took a 3-year lease. It's not long enough. If you weren't looking for the future or for where you were gonna go at the end of those 3 years. So the health department allowed themselves to be pushed out of that building. We did own that building at one time. In my opinion, that wasn't handled in the best interest of the health department, which brings me back to the money. We don't have to spend that $5 to $10 million, which I don't even know where that number, somebody just picked that up out of the sky. Ultimately, we will, if it's federal dollars, clearly, but not out of our county budget. The health department right now, as I said, can get federal fundings for refurbishing a building. And the health department would own it, health department would have that future. Health department wouldn't have a question of what does happen in 10 years. Then you know how fast 10 years can go. The health department needs to find secure lodging for the services that we do want the health department to provide. This is all up in the air. We haven't even looked at this space ourselves. This is the tail wagging the dog. This is all coming from the health department. Do we want to rent out this space in the basement? I'm hearing some that say yes. Well, then why aren't we paying for this project up front and charging rent like anybody else would? When do we get our return on that $178,000? We're going to invest into this. If we're taking it out at only $1,200 a month for 10 years, when do we get our return? That's county money. That's coming right out of the pockets of our residents, when we could be doing better. And the health department can be doing better.
Thank you. I would like to suggest that we have a build-out bid, we have a potential lease agreement and a construction agreement. And do any of us have any concerns that you'd like to address to the administrator to do some background work on before we bring this back for a decision at a later point?
Writing cost allocations, let the health department know what those cost allocations are, same as what we charge Amber. Same as what we charge MSU, same as what we charge the treasurer. Same cost.
I know those figures have been compiled. I think Jen actually had to put that information together, so I think we should have that pretty readily available.
Commissioner Redford.
So I haven't obviously had a chance to look at the lease questions. I assume that you would accept some questions by email for the next few days to research other than what I might have, because I can see this.
If we didn't reply to those, it might be helpful if when we express our questions or concerns to the administrator, we copy commissioners, just don't get into an exchange of yes or no in any discussion. And then we might come to the next meeting knowing what everybody's questions are. Is that acceptable?
Right. Copy everyone on your questions, just don't argue about it.
Right. Please don't respond.
Well, and I'd sure like to have some answers to those questions for the next meeting. Is it possible we can get some answers so we're not
constantly in this cycle?
If we bring this to the September executive committee, I assume that in our board packet would be as much information as we can gather on the questions that are raised.
There's no guarantee that the lease legal, there's no guarantee that legal can answer all those questions or that they'll be resolved there. All we can have is what we can have.
Will we have the answers from our attorney to their attorney on the lease?
Like every.
I mean, can't go forward until two attorneys agree. It just can't do.
Even the answers from our attorney are immaterial until there's an agreement between the two. That's the only part that really matters.
Yeah, that's, you know, I am not against it. Believe me, I'm not against it. I mean, I don't have the qualifications for. Go ahead.
Could we agree that we've gone as far as we can today and we'll get our questions and suggestions to Deb? If we're ready in September, this will come back in September. If we're not ready for it in September, then it'll come back in October. At some point, we have to make a decision. We have been talking about it for a couple of years.
Yes, we can.
Any last comments from commissioners?
Motion to adjourn.
We have public
Oh,
comment.
we have to go. Sorry.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Is there anybody that would like to make public comment? Yes, please.
Renee Weiler here again. I am concerned about taking on any new spending when we haven't resolved the $1.8 million shortfall for the fiber optics. What are we going to do about that? Why are we even considering bringing on another financial burden for the county when we don't have answers to that? And what about the retirement, that's 425% increase? According to our research, that pension fund is just blowing up in terms of how are we going to fund that? And how are we going to continue to hire new employees? We just hired 2 new for the judge, for Judge Cooney. We hired a part-time person to go full-time with Judge Kromkowski. I mean, we're just keep adding on more and more employees who get pension funds when our pension fund is in trouble. And I don't even know how to figure out what went on with the fiber optics. Spectrum here in Michigan has 1 million subscribers. And they turned out to be the only one that I could use. I tried Viasat, I tried Dish, I tried HughesNet. They were all worthless. Spectrum came out and did something to our pole, did construction for a whole day, and voila, I had internet. And so we're using Point Broad, is that the name of the provider? And they have 15,000 subscribers, and they're not getting everyone internet. So I don't know how. I was told that that was a no bid project. Was that a no bid project?
It was.
So how do we get ourselves out of this conundrum where we're always racing to spend money and get services and not thinking it through? That's all I want, is to, as a banker, and I look at all of this and I see, oh my God, I would never loan this county money. I could never get approval for anything you were doing if you were a private corporation, because you're not thinking things through. You're not watching every dime. You've got all these expenses that are not covered. What's going to go on with the 1.8 million? Who's coming up with that shortfall for the fiber optics? Does anybody know?
We will answer that during our budget meetings.
Okay. All right. Well, I just want, thank you.
Any other public comment? Yes.
Good morning. Laura Tarsa, Solon Township. My first comment is in response to Commissioner Alguier's comment on customer service. I appreciate that perspective. That's a good point. It would be a lot more convenient for someone who's building to have the services in the same spot, because we do end up running around all over the place. However, since the health department is a separate entity, it would also be very confusing for people to come into the building that is a county government building, and they would be thinking that the things they're coming here for are related to the county, and then they'd be very confused if they're trying to say it's a health department thing, yada, yada. So I think that would cause confusion. So keeping the health department stuff together in the health department makes sense. It's what many other municipalities, almost all of them do. So, but I do appreciate the perspective of we are providing a customer service there, because that's what we want to do. Secondly, Commissioner Ross's comment about why is this a big deal? Well, when we know better, we do better. So we are learning that we've learned that it's good to be diligent. So when you learn in the past from your experiences, you want to do better and maybe be a little more attentive to the things that you weren't as attentive to before. When you're dealing with a different thing, it's similar, but not the same. So that would be my thought on that. Thirdly, there's a simple math that we can talk about all these ideas all day long, but the simple math is the space as it is has 0 tenant and therefore 0 build out cost. When you're adding this tenant and it costs us $387,000 to have the tenant, why would we have to pay half of that cost? We had 0 costs before. And then we're adding a tenant. If there's cost involved in adding the tenant, therefore, if it were to be a helpful situation, then they would be covering the cost to use the space that's already existing. Not we share the cost with them. That makes 0 accounting sense, business sense, or responsible fiscal sense. As a real estate agent, broker, $1,200 rent is less than your average citizen in the county is forced to pay right now. So why would $1,200 be a reasonable lease charge for a business venture or a government thing?
Thank you. Oh, sorry, it's fine. My bad.
She forgets the meeting, didn't
Oh, the ending one is 5, is it? Okay, well, I just have a couple more. I won't be much.
Sorry for that.
But thank you for the reminder. As far as the reason we're in this conversation, it sounds like the leadership of the health department created a crisis that is being dumped on our county commissioners and our county government. Their failure to look ahead is now making it sound like we have to help them. Well, that's not, I mean, that's why the health department has a board to manage their responsibilities separate from this other entity that has their responsibilities to break up the weight of all of the necessary business management responsibilities. So their crisis is not our responsibility. As helpful as we can try to be, it isn't our duty and necessary, we don't need to do that. I'm pretty sure there's probably vacant land available that you could put $150,000 pole building or something on that would help, that would be a lot less expensive than $5 million. They apparently don't need the same size building that they used over there, because that's why they rented it out, because they were stuck with too much space. So you could probably build a lot smaller building, and I'm pretty sure it wouldn't need to be the cost of what this building cost. So anyway, those were just some thoughts. Thank you for your time, and I very much am pleased to see all of the discussion outwardly before jumping to a decision on this. So thank you for doing that. Thank you, Ty, for your leadership.
Thank you.
All right.
Any other public comment? A reminder that we will have another meeting following this, and you could use your public comment time at that time as well. Yes.
I have.
Yes.
I guess I would ask, when is the next public meeting? Do you mean
We have a
on
meeting,
Tuesday?
we're gonna take a 10-minute break and then we will reconvene for a budget meeting.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that, I wasn't aware of that. Please forgive how new I am. And thank you guys for putting up with newbies like me. Just a couple things. The counter to Commissioner Al Geyer's about the space not being used. My husband and I are new, especially I am new at getting involved in civic things. But just in the last couple of years, as new as I am, I believe I've attended meetings in that space that you're talking about. Is that a different space? Okay, it's not the one with the windows? Okay. Please forgive me, like I already gave you my disclaimer. Also, to Ms. Tarsa's point, I very much agree that the health department's crisis is not our crisis. I appreciate all you guys helping us understand so much more what's actually going on here. I appreciate that. If you'll bear with me. I also agreed with Commissioner Lautner's pointing out that $1,200 a month is hardly fair rent if we end up stepping into the type of bottom line bill that we may have, that we may be facing. So that doesn't quite seem right. And the main thing I wanted to address was both Commissioner Al Geyer and Commissioner Ross's focus on service, which I love. I'm a retired massage therapist by trade, so I really resonate with that also. And as a tax-paying property owner here, I have to ask, okay, but how best to serve? But surely not at any cost do we serve. And it's totally irresponsible of us to just say, no matter what the cost, we need to serve, and then end up putting such a burden on every single taxpayer here. It just, that makes no sense to me at all. So service, heck yeah, I think a lot of us resonate with that, and we do want to serve. I also am concerned with what I think I heard with Commissioner O'Rourke's statements about his prior experience with a health department, and painting a picture if anything like that were to end up here. That's just not. I thought I saw some interactions, so I don't know. I don't personally have experience with that, but that doesn't sound like something we want to step into either. If you'll bear with me, my notes are all over the place. I think that's pretty much it. I appreciate everything you guys are doing and the time you continue to take. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Public comment.
Short. Kind of an observation. I received the notice on this, and just reading how it was laid out, purpose of the meeting, discussion, potential action. As I look at the layout of that and the order that was laid out, which you revised and changed, which I thought was wise on your part. It reminds me of a comment that floated around in the news several years ago, and kind of repeating it, but modifying a little bit from what my opinion of the meeting today has gone. It reminded me of a comment that we have to pass this bill or build out before we figure out exactly what the consequences will be from doing so. Now, that is not really intended to be a slam, but actually kudos to the wisdom that you just exhibited by restraining yourselves from continuing on to something that you really have no certain clue of what the consequences might be going out 5, 10, 15 years to both the health department and the county. My impression is it really hasn't been looked at that closely. I think we probably look at our own personal business a lot closer than we might look at our county business. Might be true, might not be true. Just an opinion and an observation. But I do like to give the credit for the decision and how this meeting went and decision made to postpone it, look a little further into it and analyze it a little bit more thoroughly. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Any commissioner comment?
I have one. I just want to say, I think there's some very good points made, especially about our outstanding obligations. And that is something I had intended to mention earlier. I've mentioned it in the past. We do have some hefty outstanding obligations that all of that needs to be considered before we move forward. And as we do have these outstanding obligations, shouldn't we be looking for revenue to cover those? Which brings me to this very lopsided agreement with the health department. One of those outstanding obligations is the HVAC system in this building. So we're talking about building out even more space, which could bring in more people, which could create a bigger HVAC issue that we haven't yet solved. A couple other things in there. I think this entire lease agreement needs to be scratched and it ought to be written by our attorneys looking out for the county. They're asking for a certain amount of parking spaces. We promised nobody's parking spaces in this building. Why would we promise parking spaces? It also just vaguely skips over the space will only be used for these purposes, but it doesn't spell out no subletting. I think that's really important too. We haven't looked at the added cost of the pole barn. Everything in that building, everything in that room presently is going to have to go somewhere. Who's asked the courts? Who of us has talked to courts about their items down there? They're very nice items that need to be stored very nicely. I have. They're not thrilled with these things going anywhere. And really not thrilled with them just going into a pole barn that we don't know where that's going to be on this campus. A lot of this campus is not buildable. So we need to, that would be something we ought to be solving first, because what are we talking, another 100,000? What does it cost to build a pole barn? 60 to 100,000? So I think all the comments were dead on. We need to get some answers to a whole lot of things before we go forward. And as I said, we really need to look, has our financial advisors really advised us to throw $178,000 at a project that we won't see return in for at least 10 years? And at the end of 10 years, we really don't know what that return will be. Okay. How about we figure out some of those things?
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioner comment? Anybody willing to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
We will reconvene in 10 minutes for our budget meeting. Thank you.